Chapter 1. The Enigmatic Guest Emerges. What's up, fam? Welcome back to another chilling chapter. Before we dive into today's twisted mystery, Hercule Poirot and the Secrets of the Midnight Telegram, hit me up. What made you smile today? And where in the world are you listening from? I'm featuring your stories in the next drop, so don't be shy. Now grab your tea, dim the lights, and get ready. Because nothing in Whispers in the Fog is ever what it seems. The wind howled through the trees, a ki-yo-yurit, mournful wail that echoed against the thick stone walls of the ancient manor. The clash of thunder reverberated through the dimly lit rooms, casting flickering shadows that danced eerily upon the walls, adorned with portraits of stern ancestors, their watchful eyes seeming to judge the events unfolding within. It was during this tempestuous night that the lifeless body of Lord Constable lay sprawled across the grand staircase, his eyes wide with terror, a silver dagger protruding from his chest. The elegance of the evening had twisted into chaos. The storm was not merely outside, but within the hearts of the few who remained. Hercule Poirot stepped into the gloom, his small frame silhouetted against the raging storm, exuding an air of calm amidst the turmoil. In his precise manner, he noted the peculiarities that others might have brushed aside. The overturned vase on the landing, the smudge of crimson on the pristine white carpet, and the unmistakable scent of fear that lingered in the air. Ah, but the human heart, it hides many things, mon ami, he murmured to himself, his mind already racing through the possibilities. Motives intertwined with desires as complex as the very tapestry of the Lord's lineage. Among the guests gathered in the drawing room, tensions flared. Lady Margaret, the Lord's estranged sister, sat rigid on a gilded chair, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her pale face betrayed a tempest of emotions, inflicted jealousy or hidden grief perhaps. Both seeped through her tightly knit facade. Recent history painted her as a bitter woman, heir to a family fortune that had long slipped through her fingers. "It is truly dreadful," she hissed, venom lacing her tone, "to leave a woman like me in the depths of despair. Poor Lord Constable, a man of many enemies." Opposite her, Mr. Sinclair, an old acquaintance of the late Lord, paced restlessly. The shadows cloaked his furrowed brow, a mere flicker of candlelight revealing the beads of sweat that clung to his upper lip. He had arrived that evening uninvited, harboring secrets of his own. Once a promising artist, now he was a man burdened by debts and drowned in despair. "You think it is a mere coincidence?" he demanded, his words sharp, glancing nervously toward the staircase. His enemies would have taken many forms, perhaps even those cloaked in charming disguises. A chilling laugh broke the tension, emanating from Miss Eloise, a young governess with an enigmatic smile and eyes that sparkled like mischief dancing in the shadows. She regarded the scene before her with morbid curiosity. "Surely none of you considered that the Lord might have invited his demise? What a spectacle it would make, to rid himself of the burdensome ties of a wretched family." Her seemingly playful demeanor masked a darker intent. For misinformation often breeds confusion, an art she had perfected. Poirot observed their frantic interactions meticulously, the layers of discord peeling back to reveal deeper truths nestled within deception. He approached the scene of the crime with great delicacy, kneeling beside the departed lord. "Courage, my friend," he whispered softly, brushing his fingers against the dagger's hilt. It bore a crest, one that seemed familiar yet elusive in his mind, a puzzle piece longing to find its rightful place. Each clue beckoned for consideration. Each whisper of the wind carried echoes of secrets begging to be unearthed. As the hours progressed, Poirot embarked on his investigation, conducting conversations that blurred the lines of civility. The tension built like the storm outside, each suspect's demeanor revealing facets of vulnerability coupled with resolve. Lady Margaret's alibi crumbled as she was unable to account for her whereabouts during the chaos. Mr. Sinclair's claims of camaraderie with the deceased held water only in shallow pools of distrust, and Miss Eloise's playful quips soon turned into sharp pauses, as if she toyed with truths hidden beneath her artful guise. "What of the dagger?" Poirot inquired, his gaze piercing through the dim light as the candle flickered. "Did one of you bring such a fine instrument amongst you?" The room fell silent, eyes darting between one another, blame festering like the thunder outside. Everyone seemed guilty of something, shrinking under the weight of suspicion. Yet as he pieced together their tangled narratives, a red herring lurked. Mr. Sinclair's earlier quip taunted him with its implications. Ah, but mere coincidence. How could it be so simple? Poirot pondered. Could it be that the artist had fallen prey to desperation? Or had his desperation spawned a far more sinister plot? The anticipation was palpable as Poirot sat at the grand table, contemplating all that had transpired, knowing that the storm would soon unveil the truth. As the night wore on, so too did the thunder, an ominous harbinger of the revelations yet to come. A cacophony of tension mirrored by the growling clouds. Poirot, however, harbored the unnerving belief that rotten fruits often hung from the most charming trees. With each tick of the grandfather clock in the corner, the shadows seemed to blend and twine with whispered secrets, the air thick with an impending confrontation. Just when he believed he had unraveled the threads that connected the suspects, a chilling realization gave him pause. Webs spun with intricate designs still deceive, for it was in the haze of truths and lies that one could stumble into the heart of betrayal. An unforeseen twist loomed just beyond the horizon. At last, in a room that was both vibrant with life and stark with death, Poirot prepared for the final confrontations. The revelation of who truly wielded the dagger awaited him, hidden within the complex layers he had so meticulously observed. The time for denouement approached as the storm howled with greater vigor, a fury that matched the tempest brewing amongst the guests, each heartbeat drumming louder with dread. Mon ami, Poirot spoke softly, his voice steady. The truth, like the eye of the storm, lies hidden but ever present, waiting for the right moment to unveil itself. The ultimate betrayal awaited him at the dark center of the turmoil, wrapping itself around their souls like an iron chain. The game was afoot, and Poirot was determined not to let the darkness obscure the illuminating truth that lay ahead. Chapter 2. A Whispered Warning. A voice echoed through the halls of the manor, filled with desperation and dread, as if the very walls themselves were holding their breath. He is not dead, but cursed. The words clung to the air, vibrating with an unsettling urgency. Amidst the storm's clamorous rage, the shrouded figure stood at the edge of the grand staircase, casting a sliver of chaotic light onto the silence below, their hands trembling as they clutched a tattered letter. In that moment, Hercule Poirot felt the chilling brush of foreboding dance across the nape of his neck. As darkness swallowed the flickering candlelight, Poirot observed the unfolding scene with a critical eye. The guests had gravitated into a tight circle, suspended between disbelief and horror, the air thick with suspicion. The storm-worn windows rattled with each gust. Each clapping of thunder served to deepen the pall over their souls. Lady Margaret inched backward, her eyes wide, tears threatening to slip down her pale cheeks, her facade cracking under the weight of whispered allegations that dripped like poison from Rachel's lips. Mr. Sinclair's face contorted, a mask of frustration and dread, as Miss Eloise's laughter echoed. It faltered, abruptly turning into an eerie silence that stifled the air. Ah, but the human heart, it hides many things, mon ami, Poirot murmured, his mind racing. He had entrusted his skills to unveil a simple murder, yet here stood the storm of a tangled web, each thread pulling tighter in conjunction with the chaos around him. Why had no one mentioned this curse? What dark shadows cloaked the truth those standing before him desperately wished to conceal? He keenly noted the clasped hands of Lady Margaret, the twitch of Mr. Sinclair's lips, and the unfurling smile of Miss Eloise, a grimace masquerading as jest. As the revelation of a curse slithered through the room, Poirot quietly mused on the implications. Lady Margaret, the estranged sister who had endured years of perceived degradation, had motives laced with desperation and envy. Memories of her youth haunted her, haunted dreams whispered about promises of treasure, now eternally out of reach. The curse she spoke of had taken root long ago, blossoming into resentment, and now it bore fruit in a debt of blood. Mr. Sinclair, the once great artist now reduced to a specter of his former self, was equally ensnared in the throes of despair. His debts had driven him to the limits of morality, leaving him teetering on the precipice of ruin. In a moment of weakness, might he have sought vengeance against the man who reigned over the gallery of his failings? "Was it you, Monsieur Saint-Clair, who summoned such calamity?" Poirot inquired, his eyes glinting with the challenge. The artist's response was immediate, his brows furrowing in indignation. Yet Poirot captured the slight tremor of his voice, the minuscule fracture in his steely demeanor. "You are mistaken, Poirot. I may muse and paint of grim realities, yet I have no inkling of curses or dagger's edge." A dissonance marked his retort. An artist in flight from shadows, he arguably cast himself. As Poirot gathered fragments of the evening's tumult, the air felt heavy with deception, a cloistered nest of ulterior motives and hidden truths. Miss Eloise, who watched the interactions unfold with a glimmer of amusement, still held her own ghost close. But here lied something darker still, a hint of knowledge, she who yearned for chaos within the confines of her duties. Oh, but wouldn't it be a splendid ending to pen a tragedy that echoes through eternity? Her words dripped with morbid delight, yet there loomed a fear that perhaps her theater of shadows had etched its own cruel mark on the scene. Delving deeper into the madness swirling in the grand hall, Poirot sought out the meaning locked away behind their glances. "A curse," he stated softly, as if testing a fragile truth, "is a curious thing. Who knows how deep its tendrils have burrowed into your lives?" The storm outside raged as if in agreement, the wind howling its own dismay. Each suspect's tale peeled back under Poirot's hawkish gaze, revealing layers festooned with habitual lies. Lady Margaret's sobs seemed genuine, yet desperation can conjure such acts to mask invocations of vengeance. "You do not believe, Poirot," she countered, voice wavering. "I, of all people, would never—" A startled silence enveloped the room, broken only by the persistent ticking of the grandfather clock. Its hands seemed to spiral into madness, minutes slipping as the storm bore witness to the unraveling of secrets. Still, the evening carried on, with its pall of dread weaving tighter around the gathered souls. Poirot, ever keen, found himself confronted with a red herring that tarnished clarity in his thinking. A cipher in the form of the openly distraught Lady Margaret, who in her moment of anguish had faltered on an answer concerning the whereabouts of her brother, the late Lord Constable, mere nights before his untimely end. Could she have known something the others did not? Suddenly clarity struck amidst the chaos. An intricately woven tale lay waiting to be unraveled. Poirot approached the edge of the staircase where the letter had lingered like a ghost. The figure had vanished, and yet the echoes of the storm grew louder, resonating with the truth cloaked in dysfunction. A chilling memory seized him, and the words from Mr. Sinclair echoed. His enemies would have taken many forms. Clarity brought with it a darker truth. In the final gathering, Poirot contemplated the last strands of the intertwined tales. Each reveal and revelation coiled around like serpents in their den. With the guests gathered near the extinguishing candles, the truth hung heavy, a weight on the edges of their collective apprehension. Here we witnessed not just a man slain, but the quintessence of betrayal, Poirot declared, voice steady even as the storm crescendoed around him. A cursed dagger wielded not by the hands of retribution, but by those who wore the masks of loyalty. For it was none other than you, Lady Margaret, who drew upon the ink of your bitterness to strike at the heart of your familial ties. Yet it was not a mere gleam that cut deep into this web. The dagger bore the mark of regret you harbored all along. In that moment, as betrayal unfurled like a dark flower, Poirot felt the sting of the heart piercing through betrayal, a reminder that often those we cherish can wound the deepest. Our tribe defined by curses should also bear the burden of truth, he continued, meeting her gaze with inevitable understanding as the thunder outside echoed his sentiments. And as the storm settled, revealing the dawn through fractured clouds, the truth bore witness, stark against the shadows of betrayal. For who among us is truly innocent when the heart is left unchecked? Chapter 3. Shadows of Deception. The midnight hour hung thick with an unsettling tension, as if the very walls of the estate conspired with the storm outside to shield their secrets. A flicker of candlelight danced upon the faces of the gathered guests, revealing not only their fearful expressions, but also the shadows of their sins that lingered just beyond the flickering flame. Among them, Hercule Poirot stood rigid, his discerning gaze scanning the room with an intensity that cut through the palpable dread, a solitary detective within a battlefield where trust had been sacrificed long before this night. "Ah, but the human heart, it hides many things, mon ami," he whispered to himself, an echo of his own resolve in the face of burgeoning darkness. The murmur of their anxious voices coiled around him, concealing a tumult of hidden emotions and unvoiced disdain, thickening the air until it felt as dense and suffocating as the storm. His mind sharpened. He had come to realize that beneath the genteel facade lay a fracturing world of secrets just waiting to unravel. From the pallid countenance of Lady Margaret to the twitching fingers of Mr. Sinclair, Poirot gathered clues like pieces of a puzzle. It was then that a newcomer caught his eye. Entering the room, a shadow cloaked in uncertainty emerged. A woman with raven-black hair cascading over her shoulders, her name whispered with unsettling reverence. Miss Lavinia Hawthorne, a close friend of the family, yet an outsider, somehow snagged in the covert machinations of the evening. Her penetrating blue eyes swept across the room, betraying nothing yet, revealing everything. The tension in her poised posture vibrated with an urgency Poirot noted instantly. Minutes later, a shrill scream shattered the air, slicing through the heavy atmosphere with brutal force. From the drawing room beyond, the guests rushed to behold a sight that would condemn them all. A figure sprawled on the polished floor, a crimson stain spreading across the exquisite carpet. There, laid to rest in a pool of despair, was the body of Lord Edward Constable, the very essence of enigmatic charm now extinguished mercilessly. His lifeless hand lay clutched around a crumbled piece of parchment, the only hint of the turmoil that had encircled his existence in the moments before his demise. As hushed whispers filled the air like a swarm of angry bees, Poirot felt the weight of the moment descend. Each guest bore their own shadow of guilt, yet none more than Lady Margaret, whose eyes blazed with an emotion that seemed a blend of fury and terror. Could it be that they had hidden more than mere resentments? The revelation of an imminent curse had already cracked the veneer of civility, and as darkness seeped into the corridors of their minds, it hung heavier still. Poirot's thoughts raced. The parchment in his hand, it speaks volumes. But to whom do the words belong? Concealed motivations unveiled themselves before him. Everyone bore a burden of history, each a suspect interwoven in relentless deception. The artist, Mr. Sinclair, still reeling from earlier accusations, appeared far too agitated, hair matted against his forehead, fists clenched tightly. What despair drove him to linger in his own web of chaos? And Miss Eloise, her laughter now a brittle echo in the shadows, watched with excessive calm, a facade that could only mask an emotional abyss. "Tell me, Monsieur Sinclair," Poirot began, his voice steady, "the relationship shared between you and the deceased, was it one adorned with admiration or fraught with jealousy?" Sinclair's brows furrowed, his jaw clenched, but Poirot noticed the slightest twitch in his lips, a fracture hidden beneath layers of indignation. "I knew Lord Edward," he admitted, voice taut, "but you must understand, the man, he was as much a victim of his own hubris as he was tyrant to his friends." With each word, Poirot sensed Sinclair's tension melding with his own unspooled narrative. A tragic artist shackled by aspirations unrealized. Yet were the threads of his motivations strained by envy or desperation? Miss Lavinia, perched on the edge of a gilded chair, finally interjected with a voice dripping with feigned concern. "But who among us could possibly desire his end?" Her attempt at innocence felt oddly misplaced, as though she desperately attempted to distance herself from the web that had already ensnared her in its depths. Yet Poirot remained unconvinced. Each interaction ebbed and flowed like the storm beyond the windows. Heavy rain slashing against the glass created a symphony of chaos that intertwined vestiges of truth and lies. The exploration had consumed much of Poirot's faculties, and yet a sudden realization struck him like a thunderclap. The crumpled parchment Lord Edward had clutched might yield answers that transcended his immediate surroundings. Alas, as the storm outside roared in crescendo, Poirot became aware that deception hid beneath the cacophony. With calculated precision, he retrieved the paper, almost expecting betrayal to leap forth from the ink-stained words. But what unfurled before his eyes left him momentarily absorbing the haunting implications. The letter bore a name that echoed in the chambers of his mind and tied Lady Margaret, Lavinia, and Sinclair tightly together. "Cursed be the day," Poirot murmured, "as you all are puppets ensnared by the strings of despair." As tension mounted to a fever pitch, Poirot crafted an emotional landscape where each suspect danced between darkness and light, their intentions muddled within the flux. Then came the moment of truth, the unraveling of shadows forged in collective discord. They thought they could deceive him, yet they were laid bare like fragile figures trembling beneath the suffocating storm. In the whirlpool of concealed identities, Poirot turned to face those assembled, his voice penetrating the swirling doubt. "Dear friends, what we have witnessed today is not merely murder. It is the very quintessence of betrayal. Yet the shadows clouded our judgment, and what stood before us appeared only as it seemed. The truth, however, remains immutable." Upon revealing convoluted secrets, Poirot presented each character's deception. Lavinia's longing for recognition teetering upon covetousness, Sinclair's artistry entwined with venomous envy, and Lady Margaret's failings boiled beneath hardened facades. Then came the final twist. That crumpled note revealed intended betrayal by none other than Lavinia, hidden behind a facade of friendship and admiration, driven by a dark longing for the glory he owned. The shock echoed through the chamber as each face contorted with the pain of betrayal, while Lady Margaret, unseen and unrelenting, beheld every soul with a heavy heart. In the aftermath, Poirot delivered his truth like a surgeon wielding a scalpel, slicing through the fog of uncertainty. "Let it resonate that the heart's shadows may deceive even the sharpest eyes," he concluded, his expression solemn, a testament to the nature of betrayal in the labyrinth of our souls. As the dawn broke, spilling light into the fractured shadows, Poirot stood silhouetted against the remnants of the storm, the truth unveiled yet heavy on his heart. "And so, mon ami, let us carry forth the burden of truth, an eternal reminder that within our fragility lies a soul unraveled." Chapter 4. The Telegram's Clue. The tumult of the storm raged outside, thunderclaps echoing like ominous drums in the distance, as the air within the dimly lit drawing room clung, thick with foreboding. A figure lay motionless on the carpet, the faint glimmer of candlelight illuminating a face frozen in shock. Lord Edward Constable's lifeless form made a grotesque contrast against the elegant trappings of wealth surrounding him, a macabre reminder that even the most refined worlds harbor nameless horrors. Yet in that biting silence, one detail pierced through the chaos: a telegram, crumpled and hastily discarded, whispering secrets in a language of dread. Hercule Poirot, with his impeccable sense of order, felt the rush of tumult that had overtaken the gathering, each moment taut with unspooled tension. "Ah, but the human heart, it hides many things, mon ami," he murmured quietly, urgency pushing his thoughts forward as he stepped closer to the lifeless body. Clutched in a hand now, too still was the telegram, the ink blurred by the dampness of a nearby spillage, a truth concealed within this weighted tragedy. As he examined the telegram, Poirot allowed himself a moment of reflection. The starkness of the room felt amplified by the shadows that danced half-heartedly against the walls. His intellect honed in on the details, the slant of the writing, the abrupt and jagged signatures at the end. "What haunts you, dear friend?" he thought, feeling the chilling brush of something dark and hidden skirting the edges of his awareness. Emerging from the unseen corners of that storm-swept night were the guests, their faces washed in expressions of shock and horror. Miss Lavinia Hawthorne stood in the doorframe, her raven-black hair clinging to her skin from the storm's neglect. She appeared a statue carved in fear, betraying nothing by way of emotion, yet revealing enough to discover unease lurking beneath her poised facade. A friend of the family, yet an outsider in trust, Lavinia's connection to Lord Edward felt like a silken thread wrapped around thorny secrets, its surface smooth, yet sharp. Beside her, Mr. Sinclair's agitation danced upon the very air in the drawing room. His eyes darted nervously, reflecting both despair and feigned concern as he struggled to mask his inner torment. Perhaps it was envy that stirred within him, that aged resentment of a talent outshone, added fuel to the fire that now touched the heart of their fellowship veiled by deception. The artist's spirit seemed tethered to the allure of recognition, an insatiable yearning that shadowed him, the serpent of jealousy lurking just beneath his skin. Then, of course, Lady Margaret, the indomitable matriarch who ruled this domain with iron grace. Her sharp features seemed chiseled from granite, every flicker of her gaze reverberating with intensity. Behind her charming smile lay a woman capable of unfathomable depths. Betrayal did not shy from her lips, and she concealed long-held grievances beneath layers of societal expectation. "Calm yourselves, s'il vous plaît," Poirot commanded, casting searching looks at the gathered audience. "Let us attend to the mysteries that suffocate in this room. Each of you bears a weight today, an affliction that might reveal the truth amidst the shadows." The atmosphere thickened with unrelenting tension as Poirot began his inquiry, dissecting each detail with the precision of a surgeon. Miss Lavinia's voice broke the hesitance, laced with false confidence. But what could possibly lead to such a tragic fate? Edward was, above all, a man of charm, she uttered, though the tremor in her tone hinted at the fragility of her fortitude. "Indeed, charm can often be a most beguiling mask, madame," Poirot replied thoughtfully, sensing the undercurrent of emotions swirling in the room. "Tell me, did he happen to receive a message today that may be worth examining? A correspondence that might reveal an intent unbeknownst to others?" As he spoke, he turned back to the telegram, still gripped within Lord Edward's lifeless hand. The message, alluding to an urgent reunion, was nondescript yet heavy with insinuation. Poirot considered its origins. The name at the bottom, a mere scrawl, seemed scorned by an unfulfilled promise. "Every word demands scrutiny," he whispered, secretive shadows swirling in thoughts unsaid. The investigation unfolded, and one by one, the guests revealed their alibis with careful precision, carefully gauging Poirot's intent. Sinclair spoke of a meeting with Lord Edward, a simple exchange of ideas regarding art, but his eyes flashed with something deeper, an unusual resentment lurking behind, words chosen with care. Meanwhile, Lady Margaret spoke harshly of Edward's previous engagements, her biting remarks tinged with unyielding emotion, concealed as dismissive ire. "There are greater concerns for one who takes too much," she spat, her frustration layering a truth that remained unvoiced. As Poirot coaxed details from the reluctant attendees, whispers of conspiracy swirled around the telegram. A call for urgency had been demanded, one that hinted at more insidious desires, drawing upon buried resentments that now clawed their way back toward the surface. Amidst this tide of secrets, Poirot knew not to allow himself to be swept away in the frenzy. Yet there lingers an illusion, a ruse perhaps, he contemplated, the storm outside a mere echo of turmoil that thrummed within the house. In the recesses of his mind, connections were falling into place, yet inevitably the truth was enshrouded in mist. Each character enacting their own narrative, ragged but raw. A curious line caught his attention towards dusk, a phrase seemingly innocuous but weighed heavily with potential implications. "We must meet again. It is essential," it read, and in an instant, Poirot's perceptive faculties sharpened. One subject of distinct concern had begun to eclipse the confusion. Lavinia. Questions unfurled. Was this a tangled snare of longing or malice? Then, with a palpable jolt, the key piece of misdirection crystallized. A red herring had led him astray. Lavinia's shock was layers thick, but her appearance at the telegram's end meant an invitation to dance in half-truths. As the dawning recognition glowed like candlelight upon unturned pages, he felt heartbreak ebbing towards an eventual destination. And so, The curtain drew back. The final unveiling stripped away the masks of every player entwined in this darkened drama. When Poirot finally paused, allowing the truth to wash over the assembly, he addressed them with mournful resonance. The lament you all share runs deeper than envy or bitterness. Beyond each word spoken lies tragedy's portrait. None are untouched by the harsh shadows. As the night waned into dawning hues, the revelation stood stark against the shadows of betrayal. Betrayal by none other than Lavinia, who had donned the guise of ally while seeked unfettered validation, and perhaps desired more than mere recognition. The inheritance of heartache and tragedy whispered on the telegram's grave ink. And as Poirot turned away from the desolation echoed in their expressions, he offered one last remark that lingered like a tempest in the heart. What shall we choose to become? Shadows entangled in despair, or architects of our own sunlight? Chapter 5. The First Victim. A flash of lightning illuminated the darkened manor, its light slicing through the thick ambiance of despair that clung to the gathering like a funeral shroud. In that fleeting moment, the disheveled figure sprawled across the ornate rug caught the eye. A lifeless body, the once vibrant colors of Lord Edward Constable now muted by the pallor of death. His expression, frozen in profound shock, lent the chilling air a sense of urgency as the rumble of thunder reverberated beyond the stained glass windows. Hercule Poirot stepped cautiously into the dimly lit drawing room, the tension palpable as it crackled like the storm outside. The room was beset with shadows, cloaking each person in a veil of uncertainty as they flitted nervously around the expanse. Poirot's sharp eyes darted across the faces of the assembled, a plethora of emotions dancing behind their tense visages, the looming specter of death heavy upon them. Ah, but the human heart, he mused quietly. It hides many things, mon ami. With a measured breath, he anchored his thoughts, focusing on the grim tableau that awaited his unraveling. Beside Lord Edward's body stood Lavinia Hawthorne, her raven-black hair slicked against her forehead. She exuded a facade of composure, yet her trembling hands hinted at a deeper disquiet. Once a celebrated muse of Edward's artistic pursuits, she now appeared decidedly shaken, her gaze flitting over the room. "This is horrid," she gasped, her voice quavering, yet dripping with a sense of theatrical despair that felt rehearsed. Poirot regarded her with a knowing glance. Could there be more to her startled disposition than mere shock? Next to her hovered Sinclair, the artist characterized by a deep-seated envy that coiled within him, feeding on his own insecurities. He shifted restlessly. A storm of emotions played out across his pale, pinched face. Why would anyone consider harming Edward? He was beloved, he stammered, yet the tremor in his voice spoke to an untruth he concealed beneath layers of false concern. Poirot could observe the way his fingers clenched and unclenched repeatedly, a telltale sign of an agitation more profound than mere sorrow. Lady Margaret, the matriarch draped in an elegant gown, surveyed the room with an iron grip cloaked as an air of control. Her expression was unyielding, yet the slight twitch of her lips betrayed an inner turmoil. This sort of scandal is not for decent folk. Someone must pay for this egregious act, she cried, her voice echoing sharply in the air, laden with grief. Yet Poirot detected a flicker of something darker, a smoldering ambition lurking behind the facade of mourning. As Poirot watched the assembly, dissecting each characteristic with the precision of a jeweler assessing a flawed diamond, he noted a damp telegram still grasped within Edward's cold fingers. He stepped forward, prompting an uneasy hush to drape over the group. "Ah, but what is this?" he mused aloud, gently prying the crumpled message from the lifeless grip. As the ink smudged with moisture seemed to come alive under his scrutiny, one phrase rattled within him with mounting urgency. "We must meet again. It is essential." The weight of these simple words hung heavy in the air, suggestive of harsh realities beyond the facade. The storm outside intensified, clawing against the manor's formidable walls, adding an ominous cadence to the atmosphere. With a commanding gesture, Poirot addressed the assembly. "Dear friends, the wind howls as do the shadows within your hearts. We must traverse this darkness together. Each one of you bears a secret. It opens the door to suspicions yet unexplored. As he initiated his questioning, one figure stood in stark relief against the turmoil. Miss Lavinia. Did Lord Edward receive any messages of urgency before his untimely demise? Something which may speak of intentions dark or sinister? Poirot's question hung in the air, charged with suspense. Lavinia hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty darkening her countenance before she answered. I don't believe so. He was busy with his own affairs. Yet it was Sinclair's assertion that rang false. The nervous energy radiating from him confirmed Poirot's suspicion. Tell me more, Poirot urged gently, peeling back the layers. Your relationship with Edward was one of rivalry, was it not? A bittersweet rivalry steeped in ambition? Sinclair paled, his mouth barely opening before Lady Margaret interjected sharply. What fade does this serve? Edward was a man of unflinching charm. Leave mere speculation aside. Her tone dripped with a desperation that tucked away the truth behind her tight grip on control. Despite the interjections, Poirot pressed on, sense toying with his logical faculties. Airy, each character played their part. Intricacies began to knot uncomfortably. A battle of wills unfolding before his keen eyes. Whispers of betrayal floated like ghastly specters around the room, taunting the possibility of secrets left unvoiced. Yet even in all this, Poirot discerned misplaced clues, red herrings that sought to deceive him as though draping a shroud over the true motives of every participant. A half-heard conversation drifted through the air about a secretive meeting, an urgent call for a reunion. He began to thread the delicate tapestry of lies. The evening climaxed in an ambiance thick with tension, each character a potential harbinger of doom, each glance, each hesitation, an infraction against honesty. Ultimately, Poirot's mind whirled with conflicting motivations, yet clarity soon emerged as he honed in on Lavinia's burden of desire, a longing fracturing bonds disguised beneath a cloak of feigned innocence. As dawn approached, Poirot gathered them in a frenetic tableau, reflecting faces drawn in the stark light beneath unfolding shadows. The tragedy wrought here runs deep. Betrayal lives not only alongside envy, but it thrives within the cradle of ambition, he pronounced gravely. Then the final twist unraveled. The telegram's cryptic essence was a snare designed not by Lavinia, but rather by Lady Margaret, who, in an act of desperate vengeance against her erstwhile friend, had concealed deeper ambitions entwined with preservation of status, comfortable, yet deadly. You manipulated their fears and desires, twisting them toward your own ends. Lady Margaret faltered, the mask of authority slipping as the fractured truth emerged. You do not understand, she hissed, rage seeping through her poised veneer. But Poirot remained unfazed, the tragic fabric of their interconnections alive in the air. What shall we choose to become? Shadows entangled in despair, or architects of our own sunlight? The final words echoed, a haunting refrain as the light broke fully, exposing the damning truth hidden in plain sight. Chapter 6. Secrets in the Dark. The murmur of the storm outside resonated with an eerie harmony, a perfect symphony for the dead. The air within the manor was thick with the weight of unsaid words, the shadows elongating and curling around the reminiscent sorrows of its inhabitants. Poirot entered once more into the fray, a quiet tempest himself, driven by unfaltering purpose. The candlelight flickered ominously, casting strange shapes that danced like specters on the walls, and for a moment he felt the shiver of something malignant lurking just beyond the reach of perception. The drawing room, once a stage for a vibrant assembly, now brimmed with a sensing tension. In the center lay the impact of loss, Lord Edward Constable's lifeless form, now a mere whisper of what had been, a charming enigma reduced to quiet flesh. His countenance was still marred by the impression of shock, his demise igniting a blaze of chaotic emotions amongst the guests. Poirot noticed the trembling hands that clutched delicate handkerchiefs or the fleeting glances exchanged between suspecting souls. Ah, but the human heart, it hides many things, mon ami, he whispered resolutely, pondering the cragged depths of grief that could breed treachery. Among the mourners, three figures stood out with peculiar intensity. Lavinia Hawthorne, her dark hair framing a face that barely concealed the storm within. Her artistic spirit had once ignited Sawyer's brilliance, yet now she trembled, the remnants of her past lingering like shadows upon her brow. "It is unbearable," she murmured, yet her eyes betrayed a flicker of greater emotions, longing wrapped tightly in a sheet of despair. Then there was Sinclair, the artist whose jealousy of Edward had festered like an open wound. His lips moved, uttering well-rehearsed grief, but Poirot observed the subtle clenching of his jaw, an indicator of a tumultuous inner struggle. Lastly, Lady Margaret, the matronly curator of propriety, strong yet undeniably cracked at the seams. Her voice sliced the hushed ambiance, demanding justice wherein her teeming ambition festered beneath the guise of mourning. As the storm raged, Poirot began to sift through the cacophony of despair, his sharp mind attuned to deciphering the hidden truths nestled within those surrounding him. The telegram had shifted the ground beneath each player's feet, evidence binding them tighter in an intricate tapestry of secrets. "Tell me," he asked Lavinia with deliberate calmness, his keen gaze trained upon her. "You were among the last to see Lord Edward. Did he disclose anything of import? A note, perhaps? A message?" Lavinia hesitated, eyeing the opulent mantelpiece as if seeking refuge. "There was nothing. I would have told you if there had been." Her voice trembled, yet the slight hitch in her breath reeked of unvoiced apprehensions. Poirot leaned slightly toward Sinclair, whose anxious demeanor spoke volumes. "And you, Monsieur Sinclair? Your rivalry with the late lord was notoriously known. Were you in pursuit of something he possessed?" Sinclair bristled, his defenses rising like a guardian shield. "Edward was a friend. How dare you insinuate otherwise?" Yet the tremor beneath the bravado fueled Poirot's suspicions, igniting little lumps of doubt as he witnessed the play of emotions flicker across Sinclair's face. With the evening advancing toward an incipient crescendo of revelations, Poirot steered the gathering back to Lady Margaret. "You addressed us all with such deliberate urgency, yet I sense something deeper hidden within your words, a concern that extends beyond mere propriety." He could tell she was delaying, her bravado cracking. "A scandal amongst the respectable is often treacherous. What indeed brings forth this dreadful fixation on justice?" The room felt closer, shadows contorting the fabric of their bravado, and Margaret inhaled sharply, her composure wavering. "We are victims of an unbearable tragedy," she shouted, though the passionate desperation in her voice spoke otherwise. In a moment of turmoil, Poirot's probing eyes captured a glimmer, a reflection of light upon a fragile object lying askew beside Edward's body. The telegram. Upon retrieving it, he smoothed the soggy edges and scrutinized the ink. "We must meet again. It is essential." A shroud of intrigue cloaked those words, reverberating with unfulfilled expectations. A storm of thoughts obliterated the remnants of clarity. Misdirection enveloped him as the cable of suspicion began to knot tighter around Lavinia, fueling the fire of his doubts. Yet just as he began to lean into that belief, another thought shattered the illusion. Was it truly Lavinia, or had the enigmatic Lady Margaret wielded her influence with an undisclosed motive? A web spun from envy, a tide pulled by the desires she longed to suppress. Days passed, and the truth dragged like an anchor, pulling Poirot through the shifting sands of uncertainty. Tension thrummed at the edges of discussions, every remark laced with veiled accusations. Days and nights of questioning blurred into hours filled with confounded revelations and dead-end discoveries. The storm outside relinquished around them, but inside the manor, an ominous quiet still quivered. Finally, the night arrived for the unveiling, the denouement of fractured truths. Poirot gathered the triad beneath the flickering candlelight, their shadows dancing along the walls like phantoms of denied consequence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice a calm amidst the gathering storm, "the true betrayal lay not with just one, but within layers of concealed intentions. I tell you, love breeds as fiercely as jealousy swells. And within this manor, dear friends, forged from the flames of ambition and resentment, lies a ruse capable of lodging itself within our hearts. Excitement rippled through the assembly as Poirot's gaze zeroed in on Lavinia. You were not just a muse, but an object of desire entwined with prophecy. Lady Margaret coveted your place near Edward, he declared, weaving the strands into a coherent conclusion. Yet look closer. We misjudge the thread of ambition. For it is Lady Margaret, the architect of misdeeds, with jealousy fueling the whispers of calamity in her name, who sought to draw Edward away from his beloved muse. Silence descended as palpable disbelief struck across Lavinia's features. The shock twisted dread into her eyes. A quickening energy swept across the room, an electric pulse igniting the darkness. The telegram! The urgency was hers, Poirot articulated, his voice steady like the rolling thunder encapsulating their isolation. The truth materialized with a forceful finality, revealing emotions entwined like threads that could no longer be frayed. At last, Poirot's final words struck like a gavel onto the twisted tale of betrayal and ambition as darkness enshrouded truths emerged from shadows, the chip of destruction chipped away. In striving to possess the light of another, you have drawn darkness upon your own. Each of us chooses, or is chosen, by the secrets we keep. And as the final echoes of Poirot's haunting inquiry faded, the candlelight flickered perilously, as if signifying the collapse of their veils of deception. An unsettling quiet cloaked the room, while the secrets they safeguarded now writhed like restless specters in the dark. Chapter 7. The Red Herring Trail. The candle sputtered violently against the sudden gust of wind that seeped through the cracked window, casting flickering shadows that slithered across the manor's austere walls like ominous phantoms. Outside, the night was draped in darkness, broken only by the sharp crack of thunder that ignited the air with an unsettling energy. Within the drawing room, the suffocating silence was punctuated only by the ticking of the old grandfather clock, each chime sending a ripple of anxiety through the assembled guests, for they were trapped in a web of deceit spun tighter by an unseen hand. Hercule Poirot, with his meticulous gaze and purposeful demeanor, surveyed the room, his senses heightened to the undercurrents swirling around him. The body of Lord Edward Constable had barely been laid to rest, and yet here they were, circling each other like predators, each possessed by the fear of exposure lurking just beneath their polished exteriors. Ah, but the human heart, it hides many things, mon ami, he mused inwardly, feeling the electric tension vibrate through his very being. The three central figures among the gathered mourners presented themselves like actors on a darkened stage. Lavinia Hawthorne, whose artistic spirit, once bright and inviting, now seemed dulled by betrayal and grief. Sinclair, the artist whose simmering jealousy had transformed into a tempest of accusation and denial. And Lady Margaret, whose matronly authority concealed layers of desperation and ambition that threatened to shatter her carefully curated life. Each bore their burdens as they veiled their real emotions behind punctuated pauses and feigned sorrow. No ordinary tragedy had befallen them. This was a maelstrom of ambition and twisted affection. As Poirot began his inquiry, the analogy of the storm outside mirrored the chaos within. Mademoiselle Lavinia, he addressed, his voice both commanding and gentle. When was the last you spoke with Lord Edward? His last utterances may illuminate this dark chapter. Lavinia's eyes trembled, a wellspring of unvoiced sorrow lurking just beneath the surface. I wrote him a letter, but, she faltered, her composure crumbling under Poirot's fixed gaze. A letter. How intriguing, he pressed. But before she could divulge more, Sinclair erupted. She deceives us all. It was her longing that drove Edward away. Do not let her convince you otherwise. Poirot's eyebrows arched slightly. Ah, Monsieur Sinclair, that may be a rather hasty conclusion. What of yourself? Your rivalry with the late lord was known by all. The artist's face contorted, anger flickering across his features like lightning. He was not my rival. We were friends, and if I may add, it is you who should beware of her charms. She lured him with sweet promises. The speculation floated thick in the air, drawing Poirot's attention to Lady Margaret, who stood with a resolute posture that belied the tremors of her voice. And we must maintain some decorum. This tragedy should not lead to further chaos. But even as she spoke, Poirot noted the way her hand twitched, betraying the facade of control she so desperately clung to. The truth lies buried within the cracks of denial, Poirot thought, as his discerning eyes began to attach significance to minute details that skirted the periphery of the emotional upheaval. He scanned the room and noticed the delicate handkerchief, embroidered with the initials E.C., lying discarded upon the floor, a mere whisper of a connection from old promises. His hallowed intuition buzzed. Perhaps mere words alone could not convey the competition that thrived among them. The storm intensified outside, raging as Poirot commenced to interrogate further. "There was a telegram found near Edward's body," he began, producing it from his inside pocket. It read, "We must meet again. Urgent." A correspondence from whom? A hidden acquaintance or a reminder of desires unfulfilled? While Lavinia shifted uncomfortably, a flicker of surprise crossed Lady Margaret's stern features, hinting at an association she wished to keep veiled. "It could mean anything, Monsieur Poirot. Do not let your imagination drift into the realm of fanciful interpretations," she asserted, yet the haste in her defense gave weight to Poirot's scrutiny. As hours turned into a dim fog of deliberation, Poirot began to collect threads of evidence that wound through the fabric of their lives, but with each revelation came layers of misdirection. The clandestine nature of the telegram, the passionate jealousy, the veiled affections, each element formed a labyrinth of deceit. There was the suggestion of motive braided with deeper emotions, yet every seemingly obvious clue dissolved into ambiguity, drawing Poirot closer to a tantalizing truth. Days passed, marked by the ever-present unease that coiled around each character with jealous insistence. As they retreated behind their own walls of pretense, Poirot remained resolute, scrutinizing their movements, their expressions, each involuntary reaction echoing like a persistent melody in a minor key. The players became more adept at disguising their hands, but Poirot's reflections persisted. The facade of normality lies marred beneath a sheen of jealousy. Even the most elegant of lives harbor ghosts. And then, in a moment of quiet revelation, Poirot gathered them once more beneath the dim light, flickering precariously. Over a polished table, shadows now deeper and longer than before. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and authoritative, "the truth lies not within the jealousy that drives their fears. No, it is within the depths of their betrayal and assumptions that I have recognized a divergence." With deft precision, he wove the threads of their emotions, the fabric of lies now becoming inseparable from their true motivations. The telegram, it was not merely a call for reunion. It deceived, even me, for within its confines ensnared a falsehood, the desire to discard old friendships for new alliances. And here lies the crux of the matter. Murmurs cascaded through the room as Poirot's gaze sharpened upon Lady Margaret. "It was you who yearned for the esteem and adoration of Lord Edward, to supplant your own inadequacies. You manipulated their fears and desires like the seasoned curator of betrayal you are." A confession hung heavy in the atmosphere as the depth of her plight clawed through the carefully maintained curtain of propriety. "No," she countered, the tremor of her voice betraying her. "You do not understand. I was simply trying to protect what was ours." But Poirot's calm facade remained unmoved. "Ah, madam, it is you who have misjudged the essence of affection. The real red herring lies buried in the trust each held, twisting their emotions like the finest strands of silk into venomous threads." As he stood, the candlelight flickered dangerously, mirroring the turbulence that threatened to consume them all. The final curtain dropped with a resonance that housed echoes of devastation, revealing how betrayal was born from the most sacred of relationships. Poirot leaned closer, the shadows unable to shield them any longer. "In striving to possess what others hold dear, you have drawn darkness upon yourselves. Decisions you make today shall shape the very foundation upon which your souls stand tomorrow." With that, he stepped back, allowing the weight of his words to settle over them like the storm's aftermath. The truth had unfurled, and its edges were as sharp as the lightning that had battered the night. Each hidden motive was exposed, And as the final embers of denial faded, the shadows wove themselves into a haunting truth, forever binding them to the searing insight of their betrayals. Chapter 8. A Web of Betrayal. The clock chimed midnight, its echo reverberating through the manor like a death knell. In the dimly lit drawing room, shadows danced with a sinister grace, flickering against the walls like specters longing to escape the confines of their darkened prison. An unearthly chill wrapped itself around the gathering, a palpable fear infused into the air, as if the very timbre of night conspired against them. And suddenly a scream pierced the silence, a heart-stopping sound that sent waves of dread cascading through the assembly. Hercule Poirot stood at the center of the chaos, impeccably composed amidst the fray. "Mon Dieu!" he whispered, his gaze steady, unwavering like a lighthouse in a storm. The source of the cry emanated from Lavinia Hawthorne, her features transformed by horror as she stumbled backward, pointing toward an open doorway. There, illuminated by the pale candlelight, lay the crumpled body of Sinclair, the artist, their vibrant muse now turned corpse. A crimson stain blossomed beneath him, painting the floor with a macabre artistry more chilling than any he had ever witnessed. The shadows around them thickened, layered with betrayal and grief as reality settled heavily upon the guests gathered in the echo of tragedy. As the others rallied to the cause of alarm, Poirot surveyed the room, keenly aware of the emotional drama unfolding before him. Lady Margaret stood frozen, her hands clasped tightly, revealing the slightest tremor beneath her composed facade. "It cannot be," she whispered, her voice laced with a mix of disbelief and suppressed panic. In contrast, the once artsy Lavinia, a vibrant spirit dulled by despair, seemed trapped at the abyss of her own heartache, tears streaming down her cheeks as she cried, "He was my dear friend. How could this happen?" And in the background a servant hovered, white-faced and trembling, discomfort etched into every line of his expression. The chaos coalesced into a swirling miasma of fear, suspicion, and buried secrets, a perfect storm to engage any investigator worth his salt. Yet Poirot, with his sharp intellect and meticulous method, felt the edges of the truth pulling at his consciousness, each clue beckoning him closer to the heart of the matter, hidden beneath layers of deceit. "Ah, but the human heart, it hides many things, mon ami," he murmured inwardly as he knelt beside Sinclair's body, noting the intricate brushstrokes of life still apparent even in death. As Poirot began to gather the scattered threads of evidence interwoven within this web of betrayal, he discovered a servo of emotions lurking within the heart of the gathering. Lady Margaret's jealousy was palpable, a skilled matron gleaming with authority, and her sharp tongue, though veiled in careful articulation, dripped with disdain each time she addressed Lavinia. "Had it not been for your incessant ambitions, Sinclair may have dedicated himself to true art rather than the vagaries of your affections." Lavinia's head snapped up, words of anguish boiling beneath her veneer of grief. "You speak as if your betrayal is less than mine. What of your schemes to pull Lord Edward into your world, Margaret?" "Fascinating," Poirot interjected, his voice cutting through the charged atmosphere. "The seeds of resentment have taken root among you, yet it is the nature of passion that turns friendship to adversaries." He rose, glancing toward the servant, whose wide eyes darted nervously about the room. "Tell me, what did you see?" The servant stammered under the intensity of Poirot's gaze. I was cleaning the room next door when I heard nothing else but the screams. I swear upon the heavens, I saw nothing." Poirot's brow furrowed slightly, assessing both the tally of fear in the servant's heart and the implications seeping through the air. "And yet, I believe you witnessed something adrift in the currents of chaos, yes?" Act 2 unfurled like dark petals beneath a moonless night. Poirot meticulously pieced together each fragmented clue. The telegram was still fresh in his mind, its urgency haunting the corridors of his thoughts. "Lavinia, you claim the last correspondence was a letter to Edward, yet so soon you found Sinclair dead. I wonder, what truly transpired between you?" The artist's death had drawn a stark delineation, pushing her toward both potential guilt and the desperate need for innocence. Through careful conversation and deft inquiries, Poirot sent whispers amongst the suspects, planting seeds of mistrust that germinated swiftly in their minds. Lady Margaret, with her matronly facade beginning to crack, was not to be underestimated. The layers of ambition obscured her true urges. A darker ambition, perhaps? He turned his focus toward Lavinia's artistic realm. A vision clouded by heartache, yes, but also one pregnant with fierce desires that could prompt the worst actions in the throes of betrayal. You actively competed for Sinclair's attention, presuming it would elevate your status even above the very love you sought, he pressed. Each moment unveiled another layer of treachery, igniting further conflict within the group. Clashing accusations were thrown, bubbling over like a cauldron of despair, twisting motives and mirroring true intentions, ambiguity reigning as clarity evaded them. "But what drives you to murder, dear Lavinia?" Poirot queried, watching the shadows of doubt shift across her face. As the night wore on, Poirot noticed the subtle shifts, the almost indiscernible hesitations, betraying what remained concealed beneath their polished exteriors. The fear was palpable. Hopes collided with chaos while allegiances became fragile threads. Eventually, he garnered an inconspicuous detail: Lavinia's discarded handkerchief, embroidered with the initials EC, caught in the flow of desperate actions. The very thing capable of condemning her now lay ensnared, a silent witness. When the hour drew nearer for his revelation, Poirot gathered the haunted souls before him, shadows stretching long and perilous as the remnants of the night coalesced around them. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, voice steady yet imbued with finality, "the specter of Sinclair's death looms large above us. And yet, as I scrutinized your interactions, certain truths were revealed. The telegram was not just a vessel, but a manipulation, cleverly crafted to mislead and misguide." The tension rose palpably as Poirot stood impassively like an arbiter of truth. In truth, Lavinia never wrote it, for it was an effort prompted by none other than you, Lady Margaret, to cast suspicion elsewhere, to feign innocence while weaving your web. It is your pen that struck the canvas with fatal intent, the very motive of your jealousy, an ambition to remove the obstacles to your newly envisaged future with the late Lord Edward. Gasps of shock accompanied his assertion, trembling through the air as betrayal etched itself into the very fabric of their existence. Yet in one final betrayal, it was Lavinia who had witnessed everything. The letter fabricating affection where only deceit had dwelled. "You were the deceptive hand behind your own tragedy, Lady Margaret," Poirot proclaimed, the weight of his words shattering the silence. With the tides of truth crashing upon the shores of reason, Poirot concluded, "Ah, but as I observed, you've all learned this, haven't you? In striving to possess what others hold dear, you have drawn darkness upon yourselves. Deceptions birthed from bonds you once cherished now haunt you in this bitter twilight." And with that, the echoes of his wisdom hung heavy in the room, a reminder that betrayal oftentimes wears the guise of love. The manor now stood, shadowy and ominous, a witness to the wreckage of ambition, an idea too powerful to grasp without consequence. As Poirot withdrew into the darkness, a final beam of candlelight flickered and then extinguished, marking not just the end of the night, but the destructive resolve of their buried betrayals. Chapter 9. The Midnight Revelation. The clock struck the witching hour, its chime vibrating through the stagnant air of Hawthorne Manor like the low growl of a beast awoken from its slumber. Outside, the wind howled, rattling the window panes, while an oppressive darkness engulfed the estate, making the twisted shadows pulsate and flicker in the feeble candlelight. Hercule Poirot stood at the threshold of the drawing room, eyes fixed on a wall of secrets that seemed to breathe with despair, unaware that the depths of human affection were about to be laid bare. Earlier, that evening, the room had been filled with strained laughter and nervous chatter, a fragile facade masking the chaos that simmered beneath. Lady Margaret, her poise threatened by the weight of unspoken accusations, had insisted on gathering all members of the party for clarity, the invitation laced with anxiety. With her sharp, defiant gaze, she scrutinized her companions, the once budding artist Lavinia, who now wore the shroud of guilt like a second skin, and young Edward, a man caught between ambition and loyalty, whose barely restrained emotions painted him an innocent victim in a tangled web of betrayal. But tonight, with Sinclair's tragic fate heavy upon them, tension had thickened the air, suffocating all semblances of camaraderie. Poirot advanced slowly, his mind a tempest of swirling thoughts. Mon ami, he reflected, the deception around us is as shadowy as these very walls. Betrayal takes root in the hearts of those who deceive themselves most of all. The flickering candlelight cast a wavering glow upon Lavinia, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, contrasting sharply with Lady Margaret's frigid reserve. It was as if the very room conspired against the truth, each figure a harbinger of secrets kept too long. As he prepared to offer his condolences, an unexpected noise broke the oppressive stillness, a soft rustling from the adjacent library. Poirot turned sharply, his instincts prickling. "Pardon, mes amis," he interjected with gentle authority, "but the echoes of the past often linger in corners forgotten. I shall investigate." He excused himself with a bow, the heavy aura of foreboding trailing behind him as he entered the darkened passageway. The library lay ensconced in gloom, the air thick with dust motes dancing in the shafts of light. Upon the oak desk, beneath a layer of somber shadows, Poirot discerned an object, a small, glimmering brooch shaped like a quill, its opalescent stones catching the faint light. Intrigued, he picked it up, recognition dawning, a token he had seen clutched tightly within Lavinia's hand during days of spirited conversation. "Ah, what secrets do you hold?" he mused quietly. As he pocketed the brooch, another sound skimmed through the silence, an indignant gasp, and it ensconced Poirot's thoughts like a specter looming behind him. "Who goes there?" Poirot queried, heart quickening as he turned to confront the source. To his astonishment, he found Lady Margaret, her complexion drained of color, eyes wide, with apprehension. "You should not be here, Poirot. You cannot—" she faltered, a silent plea etched upon her features. "Nonsense, madame," Poirot replied, a keen interest sparking within him. "It is precisely in moments of darkness that the truth longs to surface." He studied her, noting the discomfort rippling beneath her poised exterior. "What brings you creeping like a shadow in the night?" I sought solace among the words of the past," she declared, her voice a fragile thread. "Sinclair's death has brought a tempest upon us all. I merely wish to escape the storm." Her facade began to splinter under the weight of scrutiny, revealing fragments of vulnerability that invited his relentless pursuit of truth. With careful precision, Poirot navigated the conversation, planting seeds of curiosity and doubt. "But isn't it on a stormy night such as this, madame, that we confront our true fears? What if the words you seek only echo the sorrows you yet harbor?" Her silence became a veil hung low, one he sensed concealed far deeper truths. Upon returning to the drawing room, Poirot found the atmosphere altered. Tension now vibrated with whispered accusations. Edward had shifted from stoic observer to impassioned defender of Lavinia, whose grief unraveled before him into white-hot rage against Lady Margaret. The room crackled with distrust, and he could not help but marvel at their human folly. "Ah, but the human heart, it hides many things," he reflected. Each confrontation led to fleeting revelations, a montage of betrayals nestled deep within familial bonds. Lavinia's once artful tongue became tattered and bitter, words lashing out not only at Margaret, but also against Edward, as if trying to assert herself as the only victim in this insidious game. Yet Poirot was acutely aware of emotions fracturing beneath the surface of their charades. As the storm poured outside, casting erratic shadows upon their figures, Poirot orchestrated the unfolding tragedy with deliberate ease. "Mon ami, the time has come to untangle the threads binding our fates," he declared. All eyes turned to him, an amalgamation of suspicion and anticipation coaxing their turbulent hearts. "Lavinia," he began, fixing her with a steady gaze, "you find yourself ensnared between grief and ambition. Your artistry, which once floored the hearts of many, now darkens with doubt." A shudder rippled through her as she met his gaze with steely defiance. "I would never take a life for ambition," Poirot. Sinclair understood my artistry. I adored him. Ah, but passion speaks in tongues unknown, and ambition bears strange fruits, he countered, allowing the air of revelation to palpitate around them. And yet, a storm arises the longer we linger in this charade, does it not? His penetrating gaze drifted toward Edward, whose stance had shifted nervously. Tell me, young Edward, what role did the letter from Sinclair, the one that fueled this feud, play in your heart? Edward's eyes darkened, secrets etched into the lines of his face. I did not, he began, but faltered under the weight of Poirot's stare, the very air carrying the fragrance of betrayal cloaked in innocence. As they exchanged fatal glances, an unsettling truth began to surface. Poirot pulled the quill brooch from his pocket, the light flashing upon its curved edges. I found this in the library. Lavinia's connection? No. A tie that binds. But what if, my dear friends, it is more than a mere trinket? Lady Margaret gasped softly, the veneer of control fading as vivid memories rushed forth. It is not what it seems, she implored, gathering her courage. I had no part in this vile act. You must believe me. But a tempest swirled within her secrets, nestling amidst the darkness of her heart. Poirot held their ire and curiosity in deft balance. But it is precisely who I do not suspect that reveals the final twist of truth. He raised an eyebrow, each individual on edge. The telegram was a ruse, crafted not by Lavinia nor by you, Mademoiselle Margaret, but an entirely unexpected hand. The very man you sought to shield, Edward. As eyes widened in disbelief, Poirot continued. You, Edward, your love for Lavinia intertwined with jealousy for Sinclair's affections. This letter was but a tool. Your emotions led you down the very path to murder. Betrayal washed over everyone's faces, like the storm ravaging the world outside. Edward's facade finally crumbled under the pressure, revealing his anger and despair. It was he who had grown tired of the love tangling two women, a lover's quarrel turning fatal. I never meant for it to happen, he uttered, his voice raw with anguish. I only wanted to protect her from Sinclair's intent to leave. Poirot nodded solemnly, allowing the weight of truth to settle in. And in your desire to safeguard your love, mon ami, you brought about the factors that led to destruction. As the clock chimed once again, echoing through the night, Poirot's final words lingered in the charged atmosphere like a ghostly reminder. Ah, but in the pursuit of love, we often lose sight of the very essence it embodies, a trust dashed upon the rocks of deceit. Remember, my friends, that the heart can become a vessel of darkness should we allow our passions to overshadow the light. And with that, Poirot withdrew, leaving the storm of emotions raging behind him, a stark reminder of the shadows lurking ever alongside the truth. Chapter 10. The Final Clue. The clock's d'artillerie, incessant ticking, echoed through the musty hall of Hawthorne Manor, each chime reverberating like the final, slow beating of a heart. Shadows stretched ominously across the walls, twisting into grotesque shapes as the wind howled outside, an uninvited presence heralding a storm that mirrored the tumult within. Poirot stood, his eyes narrowing in analytical contemplation, acutely aware that the truth lay buried beneath layers of deceit, waiting to be unearthed. The bitter air crackled with unresolved tension. The faintest whisper of betrayal lingered like a specter in the dark corners of the room. As the group gathered once again, Lady Margaret's gaunt face bore the weight of untold sorrow, framing an expression of wary resignation. Lavinia, her once bright spirit now dimmed, clung to Edward, whose protective embrace seemed fragile against the tempest of their collective guilt. With each flickering candle casting uncertain light upon their faces, Poirot observed their movements, the slight tremor of Lavinia's hand, the tension in Edward's jaw, and the flash of something unidentifiable in Lady Margaret's eyes. Ah, Poirot mused inwardly, but the human heart, it hides many things, mon ami, more than mere love or fear. The air was heavy, thick with unspoken accusations as Poirot stepped forward, keenly aware of the labyrinthine web that bound them all. Mon ami, he began, his voice low but commanding, the shadows we have danced with in this house muster a Deeper darkness than mere jealousy or ambition. Tonight we must confront the very heart of this treachery. He could sense the pulse of anticipation among them, a hunger for resolution intertwined with dread. As Poirot prepared to elucidate the harrowing truths, he allowed the moment to linger, drawing upon the atmosphere that had gripped the manor since Sinclair's untimely demise. Each person in the room shared something more than just their ties to the victim. They carried the burdens of their pasts, intricately woven into the fabric of the crime. Lady Margaret, what one might consider nobility has in its depths a profound capacity for betrayal. Would you not agree? He probed, noting the fleeting panic flickering across her features. I am no villain here, Poirot, she retorted, her voice touching the edge of desperation. I was a confidant to Sinclair. He cherished the truth above all, but... She hesitated, glancing towards Edward and Lavinia, whose expressions mirrored her own blend of fear and desire for absolution. Indeed, but the truth can be a double-edged sword, Poirot replied, a deliberate calm in his demeanor. It cuts deeper when wielded by one nursing hidden wounds. With an imperceptible nod, he shifted his focus to Lavinia. Mademoiselle, your artistry dwells upon shades of emotion, yet it appears your palette has been tainted with dark hues, has it not? As the words hung in the air, Lavinia recoiled slightly, a spark of indignation igniting within. Her, and what of Edward? He stands as human shield before you. Her statement resonated through the gathering, tension tugging fiercely at their shared history. Is he not the one ensnared by ambition, wishing to cut me from Sinclair's legacy? Poirot observed Edward, whose demeanor had shifted from a staunch defender to a slipstream of agitation. It was then that Poirot's attention peaked upon detecting the subtle flicker of panic shrouded in Edward's gaze. Ah, but is that ambition not a mirror reflecting the very fears you endeavor to escape? What do you mean? Edward demanded, his voice heavy with an urgency that suggested far deeper sorrows beneath the surface. Consider carefully, mon ami. Sinclair's telegram was not merely a vessel of goodwill. It was a liaison, a thread binding personal truths that perhaps you wish to unravel. Poirot's unyielding gaze pinned him in place. Seconds stretched into an eternity, the storm outside howling with greater ferocity, as Poirot abruptly turned toward the fireplace adorned with relics from a time long past. Among them lay a diary, its leather-bound exterior dust-covered, yet it called to him with an unspoken promise of revelations. Mademoiselle, may I? Poirot asked as he reached toward Lavinia, who had instinctively recoiled at the mention of the diary, the remnants of Sinclair's intimate thoughts. Your art, so intertwined with your life, reveals much. What would it say of interactions cloaked in secrecy? As the words sank in, Lavinia's expression shifted from anger to sorrow, followed by an unwilling admission. There are things better left untouched, Poirot. Sinclair wrote of his feelings, but they bore the weight of my own heart, which is stained with regret. I never wished to cause harm. Regret, the silent companion of betrayal, Poirot whispered, feeling the intensity grow among them. What of your feelings toward Edward? The bonds of affection and rivalry are indeed strong, but the revelations were not yet complete. In that very moment, Lady Margaret interjected, her voice rising with a sense of urgency. Please listen. I have been meandering in shadows for far too long. Sinclair's last words were hidden to protect, not betray. Yet Poirot had already morphed back to his calm self, pieces falling into place with deadly accuracy. What if I were to suggest another scenario, he began, watching closely as their eyes widened in disbelief. What if it is you, madame, who must bear the burden of guilt, just as Edward sought vengeance upon Sinclair for perceived neglect? At once, Edward's demeanor shifted, tinged with realization. I would never harm him. I love Lavinia, yes, but Sinclair was... He trailed off, processing the implications of Poirot's words. There, beneath the weight of their intertwined histories, Poirot seized upon the final clue. The brooch he had earlier discovered in the library still tucked within his breast pocket. You see, my friends, the truth lies in what we clutch closely. This quill, though decorative, symbolizes the unstated words that led to Sinclair's demise. Poirot produced it from his pocket, its glimmer cutting through the fog of suspicion. but it is one that connects not merely to Lavinia or Edward, but to Sinclair himself, a letter he regarded as an instrument of hope, improperly delivered. The realization struck, illuminating the dim room with a morbid clarity. But I was led astray, my friends, for the true betrayal lies in what was concealed, not by who, but by whom they loved. A cacophony of gasps enveloped them as Poirot stepped back. I had thought the storm outside would yield the final clue to all but you, Lady Margaret. You who withheld the truth in your mercy for Lavinia, you believed yourself the guardian of affection. At that moment, the walls of Hawthorne Manor shook, the very foundation trembling beneath the fractured truths laid bare that evening. Poirot concluded solemnly, "In your pursuit to shield, you have unwittingly fostered the tempest that engulfed you." The flickering candlelight cast elongated shadows, and as Poirot stood amidst their crumbling facades, he whispered his final, crushing revelation. "Beware the storm within, for it can consume even the most oblivious heart if passion dwells in shadow." With that chilling pronouncement, Poirot left them to navigate their own turbulent emotions, a reminder that some truths bear a capacity for darkness far beyond what the eye can see. Chapter 11. The Countdown to Truth. A distant scream echoed through the oppressive silence of Hawthorne Manor, piercing the very fabric of the storm-laden night. The sounds of thunder reverberated ominously, as if nature itself reacted to the unspeakable act that had just transpired within the darkened halls. Poirot, standing amid flickering candlelight, felt the chill of urgency surround him like an icy shroud. There was something remarkably sinister afoot, and he could sense the urgency, tightening like a noose around those gathered in this shadow-drenched place. In the very heart of this eerie tableau lay Edward, whose visage reflected both horror and disbelief. Lavinia, racked with sobs, clutched at her heart, her gaze darting around as if seeking refuge from the tumult both within and outside her. Lady Margaret lingered at the threshold, a pallid ghost of her former self, her clasped hands shaking with the weight of memories that haunted her more than the wind's lament. Outside, they were trapped together, a caged menagerie both fragile and fatal, and Poirot felt the stirrings of darkness thrumming through each pulse. "Mon ami," he began softly, his voice a soothing balm amidst the chaos. "The soul shrouded in shadows often harbors secrets far deeper than mere suspicion. You have borne witness to a tragedy, a crime committed not just against life, but against trust itself." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle like ash upon their restless hearts. "Tell me, did any of you hear the scream? The very heartbeat of truth cries out to be heard, but it is lost amidst this storm." As he scanned their faces, Poirot pressed forward, drawing from his inner resolve. With the storm outside reflecting the tempest within, he endeavored to pen a resolution to their collective agony. His mind danced through the implications. He was aware, acutely so, that sometimes the smallest details whispered truths that could yield redemption or devastation. "It is known," he continued, eyes narrowing, "that fear begets intention. Who among you feels that chilling grip upon their heart?" Edward's face twisted in anguish. "We cannot place blame. You have cast us into shadows with your words, Poirot, as if it were your hand that penned this tragedy." Lavinia interjected, her voice trembling. "What of the telegram? Sinclair's last written words before he was taken from us?" Her fear dripped from her like rainwater cascading down the window, pains forming puddles of unfulfilled sentiment on the floor. Poirot turned his gaze toward the window, the flashes of lightning creating fleeting images of despair that danced upon their faces. "Ah, mademoiselle, regret speaks as slyly as the dead of night. Yet it is the telegram that holds a deeper significance, a piece of the puzzle concealed beneath layers of sentimentality. One must question why it was sent in the first place." In this moment, he detected the slightest rift in Edward's composure, a flicker of emotion that did not belong to mere grief. The air crackled with unresolved tension as Poirot pressed further into this emotional terrain. "It is through the exploration of your connections that I might unearth the reality hidden under the guise of misfit loyalties. Lady Margaret, you were the confidant, witness to intention and desire. What do you know of their hidden yearnings? A tremor coursed through Lady Margaret as she replied, Sinclair cared deeply for us all, yet her voice wavered, painting the confession in shades of doubt, betraying her as much as the glaring candlelight did the valleys of sorrow etched upon her brow. Poirot leaned in, focusing intently upon her, absorbing every nuance of her discomfort. Ah, but it is the hidden truths, those that lie ensconced in the unspoken, that offer the most profound revelations, n'est-ce pas? His eyes turned to Edward, a man fractured between love and ambition, whose presence seemed to quiver with conflicting emotions. Let us consider the unthinkable, Poirot mused, glancing askance. What if the telegram was not solely a message from Sinclair, but also an invitation swathed in manipulation? The acknowledgement crossed Edward's countenance in perturbing waves, drawing suspicion yet again over Lavinia. You, mademoiselle, spoke of the deeper hues of art. Was your creation a veil thrown over this calamity? Lavinia pulled back, indignation blazing in her eyes. I am no murderer. My art was a refuge. Sinclair understood my passion, my visions. How dare you suggest otherwise? As she spoke, a glimmer of vulnerability flickered in her defiance, betraying a vulnerability entwined with resentment. Poirot observed closely, noting the exchanges, each word laced with tension, every movement laden with subtext. Ah, but the heart cloaked in passion may yet tread the path of darkness, as surely as the storm rages outside. The chime of the clock resonated, its rhythmic toll weighing heavy in the silence. Acting swiftly, Poirot allowed suspicion to shift again. It is compelling, my friends, how tightly knit you all are in this tapestry of dread. Edward seems determined to protect Lavinia, perhaps even from her own entanglements. But that may signal deeper motives. Edward recoiled, reacting sharply to Poirot's inference. Nonsense. Our bond is forged by love, not schemes. Yet the truth was Sinclair's consequence. Poirot raised a hand to calm the ebbing tide of accusations. Ah, but love, it can blind one to the depths of intimacy, far more treacherous than the depths of a mere affair. He paused, observing the few trembling sighs that punctuated the silence, and added, And so I ask, who among you harbored the desire to sever the umbilical thread connecting you all? There came no clear answer, only the acute weight of breaths held anxiously. Yet as the storm battered the manor, Poirot's thoughts began to align against their backdrop of doubt. A line of dissent struck him. Could it be that this was not a mere act of fervor, but instead a desperate culmination of ire, a response to a perceived betrayal? Then, as if summoned by his contemplative muse, Poirot whirled to the fireplace, his eyes landing on a weathered, leather-bound journal, the diary once belonging to Sinclair. Imagine if I were to suggest that within these pages lie the essence of our dark truth, the final confession of a man who loved deeply, yet feared equally. He snatched the journal. Before they could react, a brief flash illuminating the haze of shadows around them. The diary holds what you seek to conceal, the very words of his heart and the tapestry of lives intertwined. With forced calm, he began to read snippets aloud. Voices of love turned to melted trust, revealing not one, but both hidden heartaches. The web of relationships became an intricate labyrinth, misdirecting all but the keenest eye. Then came the revelation, a line about the bond Sinclair shared with Lady Margaret, an unrequited love that festered beneath the surface. As realization began to swirl in the minds of those present, Poirot quietly set the diary down. And now let us consider the final twist, a hidden grief that surpasses jealousy, the unforeseen crux of your relationship. With a knowing glance, he turned to Lady Margaret, who stood transfixed, the shadows ghosting over her features. You wish to protect Lavinia from the truth of your entanglement with Sinclair. You, with your facade of nurturing care, enveloped the very heart of deceit. The horror in her eyes spoke of a betrayal deeper than mere manipulation. It was the anguish of a heart shackled and burdened. In the chilling quietude, Poirot's voice carved the conclusion. Ah, my friends, the storm rages both outside and within. What you strive to silence can never remain adrift. Love transforms into darkness when chaos reigns unchecked. As the candles flickered and the storm crescendoed, Poirot turned, leaving them to navigate the intricate labyrinth of tangled hearts. Beware the shadows of your intentions, for they bear the truth as cruel as the eye of a tempest. With that, he stepped into the chaos, the clock ticking down the seconds until the next revelation would faithfully echo through the pages of their lives. Chapter 12. The Unmasking. A blood-curdling scream pierced the silence of Hawthorne Manor, reverberating with malevolence against the thunderous backdrop of the storm. The cacophony laid a heavy shroud over the air, suffocating the very breath from those inside, where flickering candle flames bent in response to unseen gusts. In the dim light, Hercule Poirot stood with the intensity of a maestro, poised to unveil the intricate symphony of deceit that had played out within these cursed walls. Driven by the unsettling atmosphere, Poirot's astute gaze swept across the assemblage of pale faces, illuminated by trembling candlelight that cast deep shadows upon their eye sockets. "Mon Amos," he began, his voice deliberate and resonant amidst the rising chaos. "What we witness here is not merely a tragedy of the flesh, but a morass of blended intentions and hidden affections. For it is not blood alone that bears stain upon the soul. It is deception that festers, breeding malevolence." In the corner, Edward, his face a canvas of anguish, stood clutching the back of a chair, knuckles white against the ornate wood. He had once been so poised, yet with each revelation, fractures appeared within his composure. Next to him, Lavinia sat hunched, her artistic spirit ravaged by grief. With her tear-streaked face, she turned to Lady Margaret, whose paleness seemed to reflect both guilt and confusion. Poirot observed the unspoken communication, the fleeting glances, and the trembling of hands that once reached out so easily, now retracting as if haunted by an unspeakable truth. "Ah, but the human heart, it hides many things, mon ami," he mused softly, almost to himself, as he scrutinized Edward's frantic movements. The young man's eyes darted between Lavinia and the empty space where Sinclair had last stood, an intersection of love twisted by tempest. The scent of betrayal clung heavily, and Poirot felt the breath of dread encircling them as tightly as the storm outside. "Let us begin," Poirot declared, moving gracefully toward the hearth where the embers swayed or morphed under the flickering light. "In moments of tragedy, it becomes imperative to examine the bonds that tether us. Each of you holds a piece, a segment of truth that may intersect with the life of our departed friend Sinclair." He yielded no time to waste, for every second lost was another step further from the truth. He turned first to Lavinia, whose art had entwined the emotional threads within the manor. "Mademoiselle, what can you share regarding your final moments with Sinclair? Was there any strife or foreboding heaviness that clung to your interactions?" "There was nothing, I swear it," she exclaimed, her voice trembling yet insistent, a clear mask of defiance. "We spoke of my painting, ideas for our future endeavors. Sinclair was—" She caught herself, lips trembling, eyes flickering toward Edward. He was only supportive. Poirot observed the flash of resentment in Edward's jaw, pangs of jealousy underlying every word. A bond wrought by shared creativity, yet clouded by unspoken rivalries. How fascinating indeed. "Edward, what say you? Was your heart unmoved by the closeness between Sinclair and Lavinia?" "I admired Sinclair," Edward asserted vehemently, yet the glint in his eye betrayed fervor that lay beyond mere admiration. "But he was a fool, losing himself in some romantic delusion with Lavinia, unaware of her sentiments toward another." The tension shifted like the shadows in the flickering light as Poirot turned to Lady Margaret. "And you, Lady Margaret, the ever-watchful guardian, you have borne witness to desire and heartache. Sinclair confided in you, did he not? What weight do your memories carry?" Awash with trepidation, Margaret's voice cracked. "Sinclair loved. He loved all of us in his own way. But there is a deeper truth," she paused, almost faltering. "Something I have held back. I did fear for Lavinia. She yearned for Sinclair too. I believed safeguarding her heart was deception hidden under the guise of guardianship. What a paradox, no? You assumed the role of protector, yet was it simply a mask for your own tumultuous affection for him?" Poirot's words hung heavy, knitting together the doubt that tightened around each heart. But still, Poirot's keen instincts sensed a diversion in their dialogue. In an attempt to redirect their focus, he turned toward the distant corner of the room where a tattered piece of paper lay abandoned. Sinclair's last telegram, now seemingly a neglected ethereal artifact. Carefully, he approached and retrieved it, holding the aged message aloft. But what of this missive, this piece of bloodied parchment that transcends mere words? Lavinia, shall it speak to us of desperation or complicity? He cast a penetrating glance at Lavinia, who recoiled. I wrote it as a farewell. He warned me of the dangerous depths of my interactions. His final advice before he was, were you in love or merely grasping onto the treacherous edges of passion? The dim light revealed the cracks that ran deeper in her heart, discomfort transforming to anger as she defended her motivations. He provided inspiration, and this damned telegram was misunderstood. But the layers unwound slowly, and Poirot's mind flickered through the tangled webs until he unearthed the threads, rooting Lavinia as the ever-vulnerable creature of passion. But towards whom? Each character betrayed hints of clashing loyalties, unspoken fears burning brightly, yet concealed beneath the weight of sorrow. That night, the storm gathered its might, echoing Poirot's own stormy internal musings. Each phrase, each acknowledgement bore with it suspicion, yet hidden among them were two distinct truths that awaited the unveiling. I perceive a riddle woven delicately, an unsightly plait of intentions that bends toward darker motives, Poirot declared. Whether it is jealousy that incites the soul or love that commits a heartless error, the answer lies in the motivations obscured by longing. Edward, dare I question the motives that mar your judgment? Did you feel compelled to protect Lavinia from Sinclair? Were you not the one who once admired him, pretending allegiance while harboring resentment? At this, Edward's countenance shifted, revealing an undercurrent of panic. How dare you? Sinclair he abused her trust, and I believed even to my last breath that I could guard against the storm he brought forth. The accusations flared, echoing in the curtained darkness like gunshots in the night, and Poirot took mental notes of each trembling narrative, discerning both the hidden and the exposed. But Edward, tell me more about your connection, your history with Lavinia, and the truth may yet reveal your darkness. Sinclair betrayed me in more than one way. He sought to twist her heart, and I sought to shelter mine. The cries of fragile love, veiled anger, spilled into the void as the truth of their interwoven destinies unraveled before him. When the tension reached its apex, Poirot glanced at the ticking clock. No time remained for aversion. His composure bore the weight of revelation. He began to delineate the tangled bond that wound back to Margaret, a maternal figure obscured in protective instincts that barred the line between nurturing and mortality itself. Recall, my friends, that the hand that carries the blade is often hidden beneath the guise of affection, he proclaimed gently. Lady Margaret, in your attempt to shield Lavinia, perhaps you inadvertently inflicted the very wound you sought to protect her from. Margaret's mouth opened to protest, yet the words caught in her throat, paralyzed under the veils of guilt. Sinclair loved each of us. And who, I wonder, bore the larger shadow of love unreciprocated? Poirot pressed, his voice weaving around their innermost fears. His deductions stitched together an intricate illusion, until, in the fraught silence, he plunged the knife of truth. I fear the bloodied hand did not escape the tempest, but no one can hide from the storm of their lives once it bursts realities deemed unendurable. Each mask shall fall, revealing gentler wishes that marred the innocence. With those final, bewitching words, Poirot stepped aside. Lady Margaret faltered, her anguished expression solidifying. An epiphany ignited the room. A past of unspoken desires and hidden truths could no longer withstand the brutal current, and thus the unmasking lay before them. Beware the shadows of your intentions, Poirot intoned ominously, for they harbor the deepest of truths. Only in recognizing the shadows may one step forth. The storm within must be calmed before the tempest shifts again. As Poirot strode into the gloom, He left them each to confront the darkness dwelling within, knowing fully that love, though tender, could breed the most insidious of betrayals.